Want to welcome you to today's webinar. Today we're looking at the concept of meaning and purpose, how to find meaning and purpose in life. And we're going to be using AI to achieve this. Why did I think about this particular topic? What's the importance of finding meaning and purpose, and how might this affect our emotional well-being? And then how can AI actually help us to achieve the concept of meaning and purpose? Should it be something that is even important in our lives? I found that working with different groups of people, maybe people from Africa, people from India, people from China, people from England, the idea of meaning and purpose can vary based on where you're coming from. Might have a teenager who is 18, just getting through the early stages of university, but because their family find things like academics as important, because their family find things like career progression as important, the strong focus is on almost like my purpose is my career. My purpose is to get through school. My purpose is to not disappoint my parents. But how can this meaning and purpose actually start to create a bit of a problem? So today you may be here because you have spent a lot of time trying to sort of think through this concept of meaning and purpose. Maybe you've changed jobs, you've written lists, you've taken tests, you've read books with the hope that somehow this will help you arrive at your sense of at a sense of what is your purpose. And especially if that the concept of your purpose and the meaning of life for you feels like it's something that you need to achieve to really understand and get correct, this can create a bit of a threat, can create an anxiety. Now, people who struggle with this, you might recognize this way of thinking. I don't know if you've ever thought like this. By age 24, I must have perhaps finished um, buying my first mortgage or so, or started paying for my first mortgage. So MEM says, thinking about this for years. Okay, so it's something that can be very, very present, especially depending on the kind of dynamics that's around us when we're growing up, and whether there's almost a spirit of competition around us when we're growing up. So if you find yourself thinking this like, oh, at age 24, I must have maybe gotten married, or I must have um, achieved a certain level of a career. Maybe I should have been getting a good salary, have my very good car, have my pay my first down payments for a mortgage. When you have a sense of this is what you want, that's where you want to be. That can feel like something that drives you until it stops driving you. So why does this concept of purpose really matter? The reason why it matters is that if you don't have clarity on your sense of purpose, it's going to push you into a situation where you find yourself overthinking. It's going to create anxiety, a mixture of anxiety and depression. The anxiety comes from the overthinking, because the overthinking comes from feeling like any choice you make, any decision you make is going to be a mistake. And if it's a mistake, then you've lost time. If you've lost time, your plans have been pushed back, and that makes you feel stuck, and that just creates a loop that promotes either you're feeling really depressed or you're feeling anxious. So you find yourself just driving between these two states. And that fear of I don't want to do anything that will make me waste my life. You just think about how that can work. If I'm thinking, okay, maybe the job I want to do is a teacher, but what if I don't like being a teacher? But I spent that so many years in that training, only to find out that's not really what I want to do because I don't quite enjoy it. Then I would have wasted all those years. It can just create this massive loop of just feeling stuck, feeling, how do I put it? It's almost like you just feel chained by the experience, almost like the prison in a way, right? So today we're going to be looking at how we can break this system, this obstacle, this boundary. We're going to look at how we can break it down. I'm going to be using a special approach using AI. Now, I would say that this particular strategy that I'm going to be showing you today is one that I have not taught anywhere yet. The concepts that I've put together, I've perhaps taught parts of the concepts in different ways, but in the way I've put it together today, you're going to be the first person actually seeing this and how it works. So before we get into the concept, for anybody else who'll be looking at this later and was wondering who am I and why should you be able to just listen to me? So my name is Adewale Ademuwa. I am a licensed consultant psychotherapist. I'm the founder of StressTherapist.net, which is a website that I've been just working on as a way of just helping people just learn how to cope better. So I've spent over the last 30 odd years gaining experience teaching people how to function better. So helping people with depression, trauma, personality disorders, and all forms of anxiety problems. So over that time, I've supported over 1,600 people break out of their survival mode of just using my 4 forces framework, which we'll be touching on a little bit of that concept of the 4 forces framework today, so that it helps people just stop sacrificing themselves just to keep functioning. And for those of you who've been with us, you know we've been running these pattern breaking seminar programs where we're just teaching people to learn the different patterns that stop people from coping emotionally and learn different strategies from preventing these patterns from breaking people down. And again, I say my passion is that I'm hoping to develop an AI tool that you can have in your pocket. And this tool will be one that combines AI, neuroscience, and psychotherapy in a way that helps people learn to look after themselves and won't even need to use a therapist in the future. I mean, that's my goal. People will be wondering, why would you do this? Once you be putting yourself out of a job. My belief is that there are certain things that people should just have as basic. In other words, we should all be able to have access to knowledge to maintain our emotional wellness as a basic thing. I mean, beyond that, you can get support from experts in different ways, but as a basic, we should just be able to have knowledge, access to knowledge that we can trust, that can keep us stable emotionally. And this is one of the reasons why we are doing these pattern rooms as well. Okay, so going back to our content, the first question that actually comes to my mind when we're thinking about purpose is, and when I'm working with people around purpose, is how do you go about building a strong sense of purpose when you don't yet to know what your purpose is? I mean, if I ask people that question, what's your purpose in this world? What are you here for? What's your purpose in this life? It becomes a question that just throws people, what's my purpose? Is my purpose to be a dad? Is my purpose to be a husband, a wife? Is my purpose to be an engineer? Is my purpose to be someone who saves the world? But what's your purpose? So if you don't even know how to start determining your purpose, there can be a bit of a confusing thing. Now, it's important to highlight that if you are struggling to even define your purpose, please don't feel bad about that. The problem is not because of you. It's more because we haven't been given that opportunity as a society just to understand what this should be on a basic level. And so, if nobody has really sat down to teach you what your purpose is, how would you even determine what it is? I know sometimes in the faith world, Christians, Muslims, sometimes the teachings that we get from Christianity or from other faiths will be giving us a sense of, oh, this is what your purpose should be. This is what your purpose should be. But sometimes, even in those places, it can actually become a toxic thing if it's not carefully managed. I know that may come as a shock, but that I said that to some people. But unfortunately, if you look through history, many, many times, the atrocities that have been that has been done by faith organizations is just so appalling. And many people unfortunately fall into that problem. So how do we define the purpose? To help us understand defining purpose, I want to sort of introduce you to this diagram. So I can see the diagram here. At the top, it starts off with a self model. Then going clockwise, direction. And going clockwise still the standard. Going clockwise, cost. And then going clockwise, data. So this is a flywheel of purpose. I call it the flywheel of purpose. Because once you start to really understand it, you can see how purpose gets formed. And you can also see how purpose gets abused or contaminated in a way that actually causes problems as well. So I'm going to try and use these three groups of people to explain this flywheel of purpose. So we'll go first with a soldier. So have you ever noticed how many soldiers, when they go to war or when they sign up and they are doing their training or being sent out to different places to go and either fight or do different programs, whilst they're in the I don't know if they call it barracks or what do they call them? I know in Nigeria they call them barracks. So whilst they're in the barracks, while they're in the regiment or whatever they're in, they would usually have a strong sense of purpose. And where's that strong sense of purpose coming from? It's coming from the fact that they have a self-model. And what's their self-model? Their self-model has been trained by that experience of being in the army. Their self-model is, I am this person who has been trained, has done quite a lot of tough things. I've gotten through that tough things. I've worked with a group of people who I can depend heavily on, to the point that I can, my life, I can lay my life in their hands. I trust them so strongly. And I have a routine that I follow every day. My routine, I must follow it. It forms part of what my life is. And my aim is to protect those who can be those who can't be protected. And from all that experience, they form a self model. I mean, if you have someone who, the people who that's training them, maybe they're sergeants. I don't know if they're sergeants is what they call them. You can tell I don't know so much about how the army ranks go. Um, the if the sergeant is making you feel like you are not good, and they're always telling you you're failing, you're not working very well, you're not being a good team player, you're not supporting your mates very well, that self model will be somewhat affected by it. So, as I said, it all starts with that sense of where my self model is coming from. And then your self model gives you your sense of direction of where you're going to. So, in other words, with that soldier again, maybe one direction is, okay, I must get through my training program so I can get to the next level, so I can be sent out on a mission or something like that. So now that soldier has a goal, and that goal is giving him something to point his efforts towards. Just a bit like someone who wants to learn to play the piano, and they're thinking, or to learn to play piano, I have to learn to play these skills. If I can play these skills perfectly, then my piano skills is going to rise. So that gives them a sense of direction. So that sense of direction then has a standard by which you are sort of measuring things by. In other words, for that pianist, I play those 5 skills at this extreme speed. Now I can play all over the piano easily because of those 5 skills. So that's direction determines the kind of standard that I am now shooting for, because the standard is helping me understand whether I am achieving the goals within the direction that I've chosen, right? So we start with the self model, which gives you a sense of direction, and then the direction makes you choose what standards you are aiming for, or you are designing for yourself in that particular flywheel. Now, in most cases, the standard will have a cost. And so, for example, the person who's playing the piano, whose standard is to be able to play a skill, all my 12 skills very fast, the cost could be, he has to spend a lot of time to do it, because there's just no way he can achieve that without spending the time. Or the cost could be you have a lot of patience. Or for the soldier, the cost could be he has to spend a lot of time with pain in his body as he's doing a lot of the training. But because this is something that they've identified for themselves, as this is something that they are shooting for, something that they are going towards, something that they want, that cost is often not felt as a burden. It's not felt as a problem. It's often felt as a rite of passage, or it's felt as something that they are willing to sacrifice. That I don't mind sacrificing it because it's getting them towards where they are wanting to go. And so we've got that cost, and then the data that comes from the cost would often give them even more information as to this is who I am. This is how I am. So the soldier who has that spends a lot of time on the field, doing a lot of exercises, doing a lot of painful programs, is maybe felt like giving up, but didn't give up, and then he lasted the whole year. That gives him a sense of who he is. That I've been able to achieve that. I was strong. This shows that I'm strong. This shows that I'm dependable. This shows that I'm reliable as a person. All of this is giving him even more information for his self model. So all of this is what then creates this purpose flywheel. And this is now the important point here. Have you ever seen what happens when many of those soldiers finish and leave the army and they come back into society and become a civilian? Quite often they just become lost because they have depended heavily on the flywheel that the army environment provided, that gave them the sense of purpose, that gave them the sense of meaning. The irony is that it's not that the sense of purpose is lost. It's just that they didn't recognize that there was a pattern that they were following that was giving them that feeling of meaning, that feeling of purpose, that they could then perhaps recreate in a different way outside the army. But because within the army, the flywheel was created for them. The flywheel was managed by somebody else and forced upon them. They didn't recognize that there was a flywheel anyway. Now, just to kind of elaborate more on this flywheel, I'm just going to look at the student, give the example of the student. Now, the student, she's been spending 3 years in university, and all she just knows about herself would be, I must study and do well in my final papers. So she spends all those 3 years just working hard, studying hard. So her self-model is, I'm a person who studies hard. I put a lot of time into my studies. And the direction she's getting from here is the person who needs to do well and get good grades and get a good job needs to put a lot of time into their studying. So the direction becomes, I go to the library a lot, I borrow my books a lot, I spend time with students who are studious, who love to read, so that they encourage me to read a lot. That then gives them a sense of direction. And then the standard would be things like, I did my tests, I got an A, and it was easy to do. I didn't have to struggle. And that gave them a sense of standards. But the cost, as we said again, the cost here is the amount of time that you're putting into things. Let's say you're a doctor, you're training to be a doctor, you're spending hours on placements and hours on studying, almost not having any time to sleep. This becomes the cost. But the data that you gather eventually is you are doing very well. You passed all your papers, and perhaps you've qualified, and there are already some hospitals that would love to have you as part of the team. All this forms the sense of your self model. But what if after leaving university, you didn't find anything else to focus on that had a flywheel like this as well? Like this happens to a particular client of mine who, interestingly enough, she was a doctor as well. But as soon as she qualified, she felt lost because part of who she felt she was defined by the groups of friends she had when she was studying. Now she is working. She did not have any groups of friends around her. She felt very alone. She felt like life was just about going to work and coming home, sleep, go to work and coming home, sleep. life felt so monotonous. It felt boring. It didn't give her a sense of purpose. But she didn't realize that part of what gave her a sense of purpose, what was in her flywheel, was the the patterns she formed around her groups of friends. Um, and this got lost. And so part of the work we did was to develop a system where she was able to still work while still having a group of friends that she can work with. I'm hoping this is making sense, how this flywheel works. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Sandra, welcome.
It does make sense. And just really sort of, just thinking about the example, I'm just like, oh no,
What?
as I look at my life, because I think sometimes, you've got certain responsibilities, you take on certain responsibilities, big parent responsibility,
Yeah.
or something like that. So you automatically, it's going to sound awful, but it's time limited.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that becomes the purpose.
Yes.
And even though how it's going for Anne, when it happens, it can make you feel like you're a bit of a failure. Like he had one job to look after this person, and then suddenly they're gone, and then what you realize as well, what I realized is that there's a lot that I was postponing and thinking, I'll do that when, and then you find yourself older, different things have changed, the world's moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess sort of the things that you it's phone thinking about or doing, then I yes, the world moves on, but sometimes you realize actually that's not what I want to do anyway, or that thing isn't what I want. And then you're dealing with the morning and the fatigue and the looking for that sense of purpose again. So yeah, it's making sense.
Oh, good.
It resonates very much, and just really trying to think. I like having tools and models to help process thoughts. Sometimes you have the thoughts, but now looking at this and what you were saying about, the woman who's a doctor, it's like, yeah, that makes absolute sense. How you could find yourself in a situation where you don't know what your purpose is.
Exactly. And just to clarify, maybe other parents will kind of relate to this as well. I think as a parent, it's quite common that we make our purpose our children, and we sometimes even in relationships we may end up making our purpose to make the other person happy. So make our purpose the children, and as you said, but the children grow older and they leave. It can then be quite difficult to redefine, because you just feel something is empty, something is missing. What do I do with myself? And sometimes it may even be work. We make work the purpose to some degree.
Well, in my case, it was elderly parents.
Elderly parents, okay.
You see that along full-time work, so you kind of know the direction it's going to go in, and you just almost like I don't know, you operate in a particular mode, because at any time if you get a call or you got to go to the hospital or something happens, so, and it's because it takes up so much of your life, and there's that the real strong emotional attachment. Yeah, I can see when they no longer there, that sense of loss is profound, because it's not only about you've lost people, you've sort of lost that purpose, and
exactly,
you operate in almost survival mode at the time, and so yeah,
exactly,
that's sort of brought us to be.
Exactly. Okay, yes. So I think that thanks for sharing that. That helps me know that I've explained it well enough. Right. So just to kind of highlight them, I have to hear people pleaser in with a question mark. And the reason I have that there is that this shows us a way how this cycle can actually become a toxic cycle. It doesn't necessarily have to be a toxic cycle. It's a very powerful cycle that we all follow when we get a sense of direction in life. We feel we have a purpose. But unfortunately, if you don't recognize that this cycle exists, in some situations, it can become a poisonous one. And quite often, with people pleasing, especially if one becomes a chronic people pleaser, this cycle can become a toxic cycle. And I kind of give you an example. So you have a lady who has a mother who is unwell. Right from her childhood, it's always been the case that her mother was unwell. I think she had to always do the mother's dialysis with the mother from a very young age. And mom was always reliant on her. Dad was not in the picture. And so for this girl, I call her girl because at times was a girl. When I saw her, she was um, a grown-up adult. So for this girl, in her mind was, I go to school, I come home, I make sure that everything is set up for mom. I make sure that that nothing goes wrong, because in her mind she felt like mom is going to die if she makes any mistake with on this. Just think about it. So a 7-year-old girl already having that much that amount of responsibility in her mind. And so for a lot of her childhood, this was how she formed her sense of self around, yeah, go to school, come home. Well, my duty is to make sure that my mom is safe, my mom is well, nothing goes wrong with my mom. And whilst mom, unfortunately, mom was a bit of a narcissist. So it didn't quite help in the sense that she was putting a lot of effort, but didn't really feel there was any gratefulness for the effort she was putting as a child. But then as a child, you're not necessarily thinking that this mom should be saying thank you, but you just think that it's just how things are. So she grew up in this cycle of helping mom. And then once she got married, the pattern that continued for her was looking after everybody. So I'm the person who looks after everybody. I am the person, so my needs don't quite matter. So this became the self-model that she had. But that self-model followed her to work. So in work, she's also looking after everybody, making sure that people are happy, manager is happy. Obviously, what happens then is that the managers recognize her as someone who is very dependable, which meant that they leaned on her a lot more than they leaned on everybody else. So she developed a lot of stress-related problems, which eventually became led into some sort of what do you call them? Oh gosh, it's gone in my head. Neurological conditions. I can't remember. This is a very common one. Yes, chronic fatigue. I can remember that. Yeah, chronic fatigue. She developed chronic fatigue. But you see, for her self-model, looking after mom became a sense of direction. And the standard is other people are fine, other people are happy. But the cost is it's taking a lot of her time and causing, she's not really looking after herself. But the data she's getting from that is other people are better from what she's doing. She can see the results of the help she's giving others. And this unfortunately formed her sense of self, her purpose. But obviously, because this is a very negatively loaded sense of purpose, it was always leaving her with a feeling like she was failing. So we had to do a lot of work to kind of reorganize this sense of purpose, etc. So can you see how the purpose thing can actually also become a negative thing here?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, cool. I don't know if Amy and your type. Oh, she's typing. Yes, okay, yes, yeah, you can understand that. Right. So while we are wanting to understand this cycle, this flywheel, our goal is to know how we can now use this flywheel consistently in a positive way. And this is what we're going to then use AI for. Right. So this just helps us to kind of understand where AI can fit in with the whole flywheel. So I have this two images here. One the list, and for each of the node in the flywheel, we have a particular AI approach that we can use. Now, we won't be able to go through the whole thing on the presentation because obviously that's going to take ages. However, as we usually do, I will share some prompts now, and then in the community later on, I'll share the five prompts that we will use for each of these nodes. So let me just quickly share one for now. Whoops, just closed it. Sorry, just getting this up. This first, I had exactly how I was going to do it, and obviously when we're on lives, everything doesn't work exactly as planned. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just sharing this into the the chat. Can you just let me know if you've seen it? Oops.
I'll be looking the mirror.
It should say purpose flywheel data.
Yeah, there's a PDF now.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that is I will start you on that process if you are not in the community. But if you're in the community, I will be sharing the full thing later on today. All right. So we're just going to walk through how we're going to use the AI. So the first thing is the self model. Now, how do we determine the self model? We have the AI step is the pattern sweep. Right. So what are we sweeping? Now, if you think about this, when we're going through life and when we're going through different experiences, there's often moments where we can have this type of experience. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term being in the flow. So being in the flow will be an experience where you're doing something and then you suddenly realize that maybe 5 hours have passed and you don't know where that time went. You are doing something that caught your attention so much that is time just flew by. So quite often, many things that you do that puts you in the flow, these can be things that can drive a sense of purpose. So that's one. Sometimes it could be things that you do that makes you feel like you have done something nice for somebody else, or something you've done that just makes you feel worthwhile. Something that you keep going back to and keep repeating and keep repeating, even if there are a lot of obstacles to it. So maybe it is that you love reading, for example. You just love reading, and so you just keep going back to reading, regardless of how whatever is going on in the world. You still keep going back to reading, right? So if there are many of these things, many of these patterns that you have going on in life. Now, the difficulty with this is that quite often we're just living life, going through the. Can I just ask if you can mute your mics? That we can just hearing background noises. Man. So if many times we're just kind of going through the motions, but as we're going through the motions, there are certain patterns that we're actually following that if we don't, we won't necessarily realize, but those patterns are actually fingerprints of things that can give us purpose. And I'm talking maybe right from childhood up to adulthood. Now, one of the good things AI can do, because AI is very good at pattern matching. So if you've been using, it depends, everybody, we have different modes of journaling and diary keeping, or even if you have your email. So you could have emails that you've kept for years. There are certain patterns that would start to pop up in your emails, your diaries, there's loads of patterns that will pop up in so many different places. So one of the things that we can do with AI would be you gather all of this data together, it may be tons and tons and tons and reels of data, and you can get the AI to scan all that data for the things you keep going back to, for the things that seem to be very prevalent in your experience. Because quite often what that will then surface is a pattern that highlights things that may give you a sense of purpose. And this is very important for periods where, just like we've said, let's say you've been looking after somebody for donkey's years, and now that responsibility is no longer on you. And then you're just thinking, well, what do I do with myself now? Or you've been a parent. Like I had a client who just saw her role in life after having children as being a mother, but her children were now leaving the house, the home, and now she's feeling lost, right? So we scan all that information for different things. Now, some people may not necessarily need to do the scanning. You may already have certain things that you feel that you can go back to. So while he's doing the scanning is helping us to pull out potential candidates of things that we can do. I'll give a good example. So for me, if I did a scan of my own experience will have things like riding bicycles, playing guitar, going to choir, singing in groups, drawing comics, making cartoons, holding seminars. I'll have all these different things that I can pull out. And then the goal now is to think, okay, which ones can I choose? And what can I experiment with? This is very crucial. We're talking about experimenting. And the reason I say experimenting is because quite often when a person is thinking, I have to find the right thing to do, that creates a block. And the block becomes something that produces anxiety because you keep feeling time is running away because you can't find the right thing to do. But when you approach it with an experimental mind, it frees you up from feeling like you're failing. It frees you up from feeling like life is leaving you by. An interesting thing is that as you're experimenting, you may find things that you don't quite want, but the whole journey that you are going through is also beginning to produce this flywheel. Even if the experiment doesn't produce the outcome of like this is what I want my purpose to be around. Just that process of doing the experiment is already producing the flywheel, because it's giving you a sense of direction, because there's some standards to whatever it is you're experimenting with. So if I say to myself, okay, I want to experiment with singing in a choir. I've just been thinking about maybe joining a local choir recently. Experiments, but if I join a local choir, then I'm going to have standards to keep up to, because my voice is going to be important. The kinds of foods and things I eat will be important to manage my voice. And what's going to be the cost? The cost will be the time I put into practicing and all that. So you can see that flywheel just starts to get formed. But the reason that we are taking this information from this pattern sweep is because we are looking at things that are the candidates that are already potentially likely, because there are things that our behavior has proven by the reoccurring nature of these things. So that first one, the pattern sweep, I hope that makes sense. And then the next one, I would say that with the direction, you can almost say that the pattern sweep and the direction, that's almost sort of working together, because by the time you've gotten some ideas of the things you want to do with AI, the AI can actually start to give you a sense of, okay, how do I go about doing this? Nowadays, it's so easy with AI to just determine, okay, I live in a certain this specific space. Are there any choir groups that are nearby me that would sort of accepting people? Maybe community choir groups that are accepting people. AI can surface that quite easily. So whatever the purpose that you are already finding, you can actually start using AI to start to do some searches around this. There's another client who was feeling like whenever she starts to think, what can I do? Her brain will just go blank. I can't think of anything. So all she did was get to the AI. Okay, can you ask me questions to interview me, to help me surface a lot of the things I can do? And within a few minutes, she had about 20 things she could list that she could start experimenting with. So you can see how the AI has become like the hypothesis translator, kind of translating the hypothesis is getting from the pattern sweep. Now, with the standards, now one of the things with standards is that it can get a bit contaminated by what other people think, well, by what society thinks. So for sometimes, let's say, for example, I play piano. So I've got a piano right in front of me. You're always thinking, okay, it's doing a lot of things with music. So I have a piano right in front of me. Although this is where I do my therapy as well, because I do work online. When I'm not working, I can just play my piano. But what am I saying about piano? I would love to be extremely, extremely good at piano, but I have not had the time to actually practice exactly the way I want to practice. Now, sometimes I will go and I'll play for a particular church. I know I'm not the best piano player, but if I judge myself by a standard of what other people are expecting, I just won't ever play in front of anybody. So the standard that I just kind of go by is, am I enjoying myself? Enjoy myself. I say, am I enjoying myself? But I mean, I would say at least I'm good enough for people to not complain about my playing. But am I enjoying myself? Amen. You're saying that you're laughing at me. Yeah, they said that's great. But my point here is that you can actually get the AI to help you have more of an objective standard, to check on the standards that you are using to sort of measure the direction that you're going and what you're trying to achieve, so that you can have a standard that actually works in your favor. Now, while we're talking about the standard, in fact, the idea here is quite often the things that that becomes that gives you a sense of purpose, it cannot be a strong thing if there's no standards at all that you're measuring by. In other words, if my playing of the piano, I can't play chords, I can't play progressions, then I can't play piano then. Right. So in my mind, that's already a standard that is important, connected to this thing that I want to do, I put myself in to do. So it's almost like the direction and the standard, they just kind of interlock. And so if the standard is skewed, is a downward spiral from there. So we get the AI to help us to refine the standards. And then the cost, as we said, the cost can be a very interesting thing, because the cost can help you know whether this thing that you're defining your purpose around is toxic or healthy. And again, the AI can help you sort of determine this. In other words, when you ask the AI, right? So this is the thing that I'm doing. This is how I feel about it. This is the cost. How do I feel about the cost? The AI can also intervene to kind of help you find out if the cost is one that you feel able to bear, and perhaps you're bearing it in a way that actually doesn't feel like it's taking much from you. So as an example, I love teaching. I should be careful how I say that, because in some situations I would say I hate teaching. I love teaching people who are a joy to teach. Should I put it that way? And what I mean by people who are joy to teach, I don't know if you've ever tried to engage in a conversation with someone who is they're so proud, pompous, know it all, argue with everything, nothing can get through. It's just hard to even have a two-way conversation with. That kind of teaching just makes me grow white hair. But I love teaching because I find that whenever I teach, time flies. Whenever I teach, I feel like my cup is being refilled. So for me, the cost, like this hour that we spent, this is an hour that has gone, but the cost doesn't feel like it's taken away from me. I mean, I can relate. Yes, it's hard to have a meaningful conversation, two-way conversation with people who are difficult to kind of converse with. Yeah. So this is costing me time. It's costing me time to put the material together. But guess what? It's gaining me so much, because, as I said today, that okay, this is the first time I'm teaching this particular concept that we're learning today. And perhaps something that you perhaps won't see anywhere else be taught like this. But for me to actually spend the time to think through it, put it together, and help me to actually formulate thoughts from different experiences that I've had, all of that to me is edifying for me as well. As I know that it will also be edifying for other people and making them feel able to make other people grow and be better as well, right? So for me, that cost feels painless. So if I was just talking to AI, I'm asking AI, okay, so if AI is interviewing me and AI is getting from me all these conversations or points of how I'm enjoying the experience, it becomes clear that this is not a toxic purpose flywheel. Now, if the kind of things I'm saying is anytime I engage in this, it drains me. Anytime I engage in this, it makes me feel like I don't know who I am anymore. It makes me, it feels like my sense of self is deteriorating, is going empty, right? This is starting to kind of highlight that, okay, there may be a toxic flywheel going on here, especially if you've begun to define yourself by that activity. Okay. So once you understand the toxic flywheel, the cost, once you understand the cost also gives you a lot of data, like we've already been highlighting. I've been telling you how I enjoy teaching. All of that is data that I have gathered over the years of teaching people. And that data has also fed into my self model, hence driving the full purpose around those. So I'm hoping that the way I've explained how we use AI around this whole flywheel has made sense. The purpose flywheel sounds like a wonderful concept, but I must admit, I need to go over my notes again. Was anything was there anything I said here that was not making sense? I know, Amy, and you said earlier that you may not be able to give us your full attention because you have family members as well. But Sandra, did anything I say here, is there anything that you would like me to explain again? And Amen, is there anything that you would like me to explain again?
No, I don't think so. I like how the new model, I don't know what to call it, your switch on to that self model, how you've just added those things in. It makes sense.
It makes
It's
sense.
really good.
Oh, good. Cool. Yeah, so as Amen says, yes, it was distracted from time to time. Yeah. So, yeah, there's going to be the video replay afterwards. And can I just ask that if you have anybody else who you feel will benefit from this, you can share the video once the link is out for them. Cool. So, what's the cost of just keep thinking about this? Like we just learned a whole strategy that can help you start to build a sense of purpose, sense of meaning. So you see that there's actually a mechanism behind it. Whereas before people might just think, oh, this is just something that's happening by chance. No, it's not by chance. There's a system in play that's happening around it, and there's a system that you can actually control once you know how. So today, what I hope I've done is shown you how to start to actually be in charge of that purpose flywheel, be able to sort of engineer meaning into life by choice again. So for those who may be watching after, and who, if you haven't already joined the community, the Pattern Room community, so the Pattern Room is a space that we are developing to create a community where we engage and support people through learning how to cope better emotionally. My hope would be that the people who join this group, they become very strong emotional people who can actually help other people, and we just become almost like a ripple effect of goodness into the world. Yeah, you can tell that's the kind of person I am. So if you haven't joined the group, you can either use the QR code here or just text me your number, right? I can add you to the group. As I said, I'm going to be sharing a bigger set of instruction and prompts for using the 5 nodes, a toolkit that uses AI to help you walk through these 5 nodes and the flywheel, in the purpose flywheel. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I want to thank you, Amy and Sandra, for joining me today. It's nice when people are here where I can actually vibe off people and make sure that what I'm explaining is landing properly. And I appreciate your contributions as well. Now, just to kind of finish up, if there's any other question, I can give you some time for more questions. If there's anything else you would like me to clarify, even if it's not exactly linked to today's work. Any questions? It's landing and it's really helpful. You're welcome, Sandra. No questions. Cool. So that brings us to the end of today's workshop. I mean, I'll watch the video again, and if there's any question you'll send me. Yeah, cool. Yes, I will expect the questions if you have any. That's totally fine. Or you can actually drop them in the community as well, and then we can all have a conversation about it. Cool. So again, we have another one coming up next week, which again is another powerful one. But this will bring in next week's will be bringing our AI related workshops to an end, and the following one where there was a vote in the group, in the community, that we should focus now more on helping empaths who struggle to say no, learn ways of building boundaries in a healthy way. So we're going to be focusing on that after next week's last AI seminar. Okay. So thank you so much for being a good audience, and wishing you all a good week ahead. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.